Hello everyone, good evening. My name is Vivian Tubid and I will be your reporter for tonight. I would just like to say though that what you'll see on the PowerPoint are only the simplified versions from the book. So they are intentionally shortened so that the slides won't look too congested and for it to not take too long. But don't you worry because I will still be explaining and expanding each and every idea as we go along. Once again, I'm Vivian and tonight I will be talking about control and development of land. So this presentation mainly discusses about how land is controlled and developed through both the public regulation and private participation. Now with this, it ensures and organizes a safe and community for growth. So a very quick overview about what we're going to talk about. So here, the book explains that land use is controlled through both the public regulation and private development. This is to ensure and promote safety and order. So an example I can give you this is that the government sets rules while the developers decide what to build. Now, let's talk about what is under public land use control. So what is under public land use controls is first we have police power and enabling acts. So this means that the government has the authority to regulate land use through police power supported by enabling acts. An example I can give you this is that a city can prohibit factories in residential areas to protect the people's health. Next, we have master plan. So what does master plan means? It means that it organizes how land will be used for future development. I'll give you an example. For example, a city plans where schools, malls, and housing areas will be built. So more urban planning. So it will be somewhat like this area, we're going to use it specifically for buildings, for factories, for residential areas, for public use. So basically, this is what master plan means. Next, we have subdivision regulations. So subdivision regulations control land division and community layout. So this means that these rules ensure proper layout of land, including roads and utilities. So for example, every subdivision must have proper roads, drainage, and water supply. So as you can see, in every subdivision, dapat na clear and narrow nga roads, right? And in every subdivision, we see proper drainage everywhere because we have subdivision regulations. And next, we also have water supply. So that is what basically subdivision regulations are. Next, moving forward, we have zoning ordinances. So zoning ordinances regulate land use and building density. So for example, zoning divides land into residential, commercial, and industrial areas. Like for example, houses are separated from factories to avoid noise and pollution. Like for example, you can't see or you can't find a residential area near a poultry hen, right? Because of how bad or stinky the smell is from their waste and garbage. So really, that is what zoning ordinances are for. It's to avoid conflict and friction para like conflict if ever nga stuffs happen, like for example nga sa poultry and in residential area because it's somewhat not good. So those are what zoning ordinances are for. Next, we have zoning variations. So zoning allows flexibility through variance and conditional use permits. So these allow exceptions when strict rules are not practical. For example, our variance is a small lot is allowed a smaller setback. The conditional use here is that a small cafe allowed in a non-commercial area if needed. So basically, that's what it is. Next, we have non-conforming use. So non-conforming use allows pre-existing properties to continue legally. So this applies to properties built before zoning laws existed. For example, an old house remains even if the area becomes commercial. That's the best example I can give you. Next, we have zoning boards of appeal. So what is zoning boards of appeal? Zoning boards review and decide on zoning exceptions. So these boards evaluate requests for changes in zoning rules. For example, a homeowner a homeowner requests permission to build closer to the road. So basically, this is what zoning boards of appeal mean. Next, we have planned unit development. So planned unit development allows mixed-use development with flexible zoning. So this means that it combines different land uses in one area. For example, we have a community with houses, shops, and offices all together in one place. So this is what a planned unit development looks. It's a mixed development with flexible zoning because everything is just in one place. Next, we have building codes. So building codes ensure safe and standard construction practices. So these codes ensure buildings are safe and properly constructed. So for example, buildings must really follow fire safety and electrical standards. This is to ensure safety to the people as well. Then next we have the environmental protection laws. So environmental laws protect natural resources and control pollution. So these laws help prevent damage to the environment. For example, they shouldn't allow or they never allow factories to dump their waste into the rivers because of it being a hazard to the biodiversity sa sea nato. So that is why we have the environmental protection laws to avoid stuff like that on happening. Then moving forward, let's go ahead to the private land development. So under private land development, we have 1. Private ownership and development. So private ownership influences land use and long-term development. So private developers decide how land is used and developed. So for example, a developer chooses to build condos instead of houses. So basically this means that you decide, or a private ownership and development decides what to do with this land or how this land is being able to be used and developed later on in the future. So they can choose on either a condo or a house. This is what basically it means. Next, moving forward, we have developers and subdividers. So subdividers divide land while developers build on it. So they have different roles in land development. For example, this one here, they divide the land into lots, while the other builds houses on those lots. So those are the developers and subdividers. Then next we have land planning. So land planning ensures development follows zoning and community plans. So planning ensures development follows rules and community needs. For example, planning where roads and drainage will go before building. Basically, this means that you plan. You plan where the roads shall go, where it can connect from one another, and then you're gonna plan po where the drainage system will be. This is to ensure proper pod nga drainage, and it won't be a hassle later on. So it's really gonna be a long term nga kanang pag-think ba. That is why we need this gyud para dili siya lain and not good tanawon. Next, we have subdivision process. So in subdivision process, it involves planning, approval, and development stages. So land development follows a structured process. For example, land is first planned, approved, then developed, and sold. So it really has a process. It isn't like something diretso lang. Like, no, you have to have planning first, it needs approval, it needs to be developed, and then boom, it's gonna be sold na. It needs proper planning yun. Stages of planning to ensure tarong nga pag-ano. Next, we have plat of subdivision. So, a plat shows the official layout of subdivided land. So, it is the official map of the subdivision. For example, this means that it shows lot numbers, streets, and boundaries. That is what a plot of subdivision means. Next, we have deed restrictions and covenants. So Restrictions control land use and maintain subdivision quality. So these rules maintain the quality of a subdivision. For example, no commercial stores allowed in a residential area. I think us before sa Camellia, this was really they were really strict with this. Nga the Camellia homes did not allow to have any commercial stores nga to be allowed in a residential area. So we had that. Next, moving forward, we have FHA standards. So this means that FHA standards set minimum requirements for subdivision development. So these ensure subdivisions meet proper standards. Now, for example, access to roads, waters, and utilities is really, really required. Next, we have development costs. So development costs include land, utilities, construction, and fees. So developing land requires many expenses. For example, we have roads, drainage, and electricity installation cost money. So it's very costly, and you really have to think about all of these expenses. So that is why we have development costs to allocate for these monies. Roads, drainage, electricity installation. That's why we really need this set as well. Next, we have transfer of development rights. So development rights can be transferred to manage land use and growth. So this allows development to be shifted to another area. For example, we preserve farmland while allowing buildings in another zone. That is what it means. Next, we have subdivided land sales. So, land sales are regulated by the Full Disclosure Act for buyer protection. So, meaning to say, this law protects buyers by requiring full information. For example, buyers must be informed about road access and utilities before buying. That is what needs to be done good. And then for the conclusion, we have land development requires coordination between public and private sectors. So in conclusion, land development is really a shared responsibility good. For example, government sets the rules while developers follow and build the communities. So that would be all for my report for tonight. Thank you and have a blessed evening, everyone.